I was just thinking I need to make like a pre-flight checklist. First of all, I need a clipboard, definitely. I've been thinking about this. I think it's a good investment that I need a clipboard. And then I need some kind of checklist that I can just go through and do like, yes, I shut the bathroom door. Yes, I put the lights in stream mode. Yes, I paused Backblaze. Yes, I paused Dropbox. Yes, I hopefully made that computer not also do backups and break everything. Is that the extent of my checklist? Make sure the roofers aren't stomping on the roof. I think they're done for the day. I'm gonna move. I've decided to move because it is I can't live like this. I can't work like this. So we've been working on that sunshine thing, but I want to table that for a little bit because I want to do a stream. I've been thinking about these streams, a certain kind of stream. So Purge, which is a popular Dota streamer, commentator, coach, all of these things. He does these Dota patch streams that are really popular. And I don't actually play Dota. I'm just a fan of his and his games with Day9. I don't know quite my status as a Dota fan. However, I like the content he produces, and I like the idea of these big patch streams. He'll do like these 8-hour patch streams when patch notes come out. And I don't want to go that deep, but Unity announces, like we were kind of talking about in the last few days, Unity has like really accelerated their feature additions to the engine. Do I call it the engine? Unity is adding more and more features, and I want to stay abreast of those, like just in general, professionally, and because I think it's kind of interesting. So I had intended to do that for like catch up on the backlog a little bit with 2018 features, and then started making, we've been making stuff for the last few weeks. So, but then today they announced the first proper 2019.1 beta. And it's been an alpha for a while, and I've kind of been keeping my eye on it. What was a little weird, is this music too loud? Seems not too loud. Maybe it's okay. When you were downloading the alpha, I didn't even ever download it because they never said what was new in it. Like when you go to the beta download page, it says, hey, you're getting into the beta, here's what's new in the beta. The alpha one was just like, maybe don't use this, sort of. So I'm going into this somewhat blind. I did download the 2019.1 beta. I did skim through the patch notes, but only their like high level notes, not the deep notes. I don't exactly know what form this is going to take. Like, I don't know that I'm going to go through every single thing and try it. I think we may just kind of go through the blog posts, talk about the implications of some things that I understand. There's probably some things that I just have no familiarity with. I don't know. We're going to see. But hopefully this will be a useful, interesting thing. I'm sure there's other people that do this and do it way better and way more in depth, but we're just going to do it on the fly because I announced it today, and why not? So let's do this. I wonder why that takes a while. That was pretty weird. Kind of suspicious. I was doing these, this is an aside. I did this like Windows Insider survey today, and some of the questions were like, what do you want Windows to be able to do? Like, just what features would you add to Windows if you could? And my response was around like streaming features for Windows, like making Windows itself a little better about streaming in various ways, security, privacy, stuff like that. Kind of like how Discord has like streamer mode, almost like a Windows version for that. Anyway, that's unrelated to what we just saw. So this happened today. This very day, which is a nice way to end the month. It's maybe they felt pressured to, since we're already a month into 2019 after today, and this thing hadn't really happened. So looking at the little intro, 2019 marks the start of the newest tech stream. So I think it was last year that they started this strategy. So basically the idea is that Unity has 4 releases a year, 4 big releases a year. And those 4 big releases 3 of them will be tech releases. So far it's been, using 2017 and 2018 as the model. Maybe 2017 is when they announced this. I can't exactly remember. I think it was after 2017. Anyway, you have 3 tech releases, like 2019.1, 0.2, 0.3, and that is when they're going to be actively adding new stuff and fleshing out stuff. And then the 0.4 release is the LTS release. So you have 3 tech releases and 1 LTS release. I think if I'm remembering this correctly. And the LTS release is the long-term support release. And that's the one that's like, hey, once you release your game on this and you're going to continue to support your game, we're going to continue to support this engine, but hopefully not break it. Like the additions to the LTS version aren't about new features. It's about stability and robustness. Again, this is just my understanding off the top of my head. I don't work at Unity. So we did make it to Unity 2017.4, which was up to now, I guess, the first real long-term support release. Although I should check in the archives today. I actually don't know. I don't think it was. I don't think this will happen until we're out of beta. I don't think we have a 2018. Did I say that correctly? We made it to 2017.4. I don't think we've made it to 2018.4 unless it happened today. Let's go see what's going on in the archive. There may have been new releases today. There were just releases 5 or 6 days ago, though. Yeah, on the 25th, we got 2018.3.3, which would be the last tech release in that series. And so I would kind of expect that when 2019 comes out of beta, which could be months, like it could easily be 3 months. I want to say 2018, let's see if we can see it in here. 2018.3.0. Well, that date doesn't seem... No, I'm sorry. We want 2018.1. 2018.1.0. I think it came out... Yeah. We didn't get that until May. So we were closing in on halfway through the year. So it could certainly be an extended amount of time. But the question, you know, if you're starting a game now or starting a project now, you start to have to ask yourself, like, what engine are you going to try to target? I'm probably going to be starting on a longish project soon that will launch, I think, late in the fall. And so now we have to kind of ask ourselves, I think, this is going to be a 2019 project. Probably not yet, I would say. Maybe it's a 2018 project to begin with, but I don't know. That's the thing to consider. So anyway, let's dive in and start looking at new stuff. So Ben was actually talking about this on his stream last night. I can't remember. Oh man, Ben, what's your... Encode Games was talking about garbage collection only last night. Oh no, I messed up my scroll over here. I'm having problems. That was weird. Pardon me, window management. I need to get back on that Windows Insider survey. Yes, so incremental garbage collection. The idea here, so we were talking last night, and Ben was talking about last night, about there is this feature that you can just like disable garbage collection, automatic garbage collection if you want, and then just garbage collect when you want of your own accord. This is, and I want to say this was talked about earlier, and I thought that some version of this existed somewhere in 2018, but maybe I'm wrong. But the idea is that right now it's a little problematic, because if you have a bunch of allocations going on and you watch your like allocations go up in the profiler, at some point there will be like, oh, it's time to garbage collect. The garbage collector will say, now is the moment that I'm going to clean everything up. And it is really possible, if not probable, especially on a mobile device, to take a substantial frame rate hit at that moment. And so previously in the past, at least my strategy has been like, well, you just try to really minimize allocations after a certain point. Like generally in my mind, if you're doing something that allocates every frame, and there's some things in Unity that just do that, and some plugins that just do that. If you're allocating every frame, maybe you need to rethink your strategy. Anyway, so that is a problem, and is a problem currently in Unity, again, particularly on more constrained platforms. Like your garbage, and then it all collects at once, and you can sometimes just see a massive drop in your at least one frame, although I feel like the repercussions can echo a little longer than that. What my understanding of this, without having dived into it much. They do have a blog post describing it, which I think has been around a while. Yeah, last November. The idea is that instead of saying, like, my understanding at least, is that instead of saying we're going to build up garbage and we're going to take all the garbage out at once, is to have some more flexibility in how that happens. So maybe instead of saying we get all the garbage and we take all the garbage out at once, it's more like we get all the garbage and we take out a little bit on this frame and a little bit on this frame. Yeah, so instead of having a single long interruption in your program's execution to allow the garbage collector to do its work, you can have multiple shorter interruptions. So that's cool. It says that it won't make garbage collection faster, which is fine. I think I mean, from my perspective, that's not really the problem. The problem is more like, let's break it up a little bit, because there's, I guess, conceptually not really a reason that it all has to happen on a single frame. So that's cool. It is still experimental, even going into 2019. I really thought you could do this now. I thought that like this was a package you could experiment with already, but maybe I'm totally wrong about that. Maybe somewhere in 2019's lifestyle, let's get that up. Let's get the Unity roadmap up. This is a handy reference, especially if you're waiting with bated breath on a certain feature. So the garbage collector update is in 2019.0 and has a nice blue mark next to it. What does blue mean? On track. So that's good. That's good to know. And this says, yeah, incremental garbage collection, stutters and spikes. So that's great. That is very good, especially when you're working on like mobile devices or mobile VR devices. That sounds great. The shortcut manager. We're introducing a interactive visual interface and a set of APIs to make it easier for you to manage editor hotkeys, assign them to different contexts, and visualize existing bindings. To address the issue of binding conflicts, the interface can also visualize whether multiple commands use the same binding. That's handy. So that's a pretty interesting one, because I was just thinking in the last few days that I'm a very shortcut focused person. Like, that's just how I use computers. That's one of the main reasons I feel like I will never be an effectively productive person on like an iPad, for example. Like, so much of my productivity, especially in visual applications, Adobe Creative Suite, for example, is shortcut focused. And in some cases, like, especially in 3D applications, functionality is often gated behind key press combos. Like, sometimes you can't, or in many cases behind which mouse button you're using, things like that. So that is interesting to me. The thing I was realizing, though, I think there's a lot of Unity shortcuts that have emerged since I started using Unity, which has been some time ago. I mean, we're getting close to like 8 or 9 years since I've really started trying to wrap my mind around it. That I think I actually am not super great with Unity shortcuts, especially as far as, there's like certain kind of snapping things, stuff like that I don't have a strong sense of. As far as the normal 3D space navigation, it feels pretty consistent with other 3D packages. Not fully consistent, but at least mostly consistent. But this is an interesting addition. I don't know. I think early on, when I first started using Unity, I was much more prone to write, like if I just found something that seemed unreasonable, like the fact that creating a new game object doesn't create it at 000, which still annoys me, but I'm just used to it now. I think early on I had made like special editor tools to do stuff like that. And at one point I was building my own little editor library that I use all the time with shortcuts. I just don't do that very much anymore. I feel like over time I've just, I don't know, gotten kind of less about customization and more about just learning to work with the with kind of stock workflows, but maybe having a native shortcut manager, which you see in many other applications, or this visual shortcut manager will make me more interested in it. So that's handy. GPU Lightmapper functionality brings additional functionality and platform support to the GPU Lightmapper preview. It's now enabled on macOS and Linux, supports dual-sided global illumination flags on materials, as well as shadowcasting, receiving messages. Baking now uses the same high-performance GPU as the editor. You can still change this to a different GPU using the command line. Head over to the documentation for more info. So, cool. So that is that different than the normal progressive light mapper? So let's jump into rendering. I'm still not quite used to some of the new menu organizations that started in 2018. So let's check the old light mapper setting. So we have progressive CPU. Interesting. So is Enlighten just gone at this point? Is that what the previous one was called? Okay, no, Enlighten is still there. I remember maybe it was in 2017 that they started introducing progressive light mapping, and then this GPU version. So what that would mean is, like, for example, it's interesting that CPU is the default. So if we had something like a plane, this is, I feel like, the canonical example that everybody uses, and a cube. And right now we have some real-time lighting going on here. But if we made both of these objects static, we should see light map generation happen. And you can see, this is not a great example, but you could see it. You can even see it over here. It's progressively updating. It's starting with a rough pass and getting more accurate. Let's throw in, actually, maybe material. Let's make a red material, throw it on our cube. Changing that material should automatically start the light mapper doing its thing again. Yeah, so it's going to start again. So I can hear my fans spinning up because this is a GPU intensive task. Hopefully that's not affecting my stream encode. I think that I set my stream encoding to be maybe GPU based, but with the integrated GPU. I can't quite remember what I did. So this is really a boring example. We'd have to turn on ambient occlusion and some other things. But now we will have some maps. And you could see the amount of time it took. And anytime I move something that's in the light map, like here's our light map. We've got some like bouncy red here. If I move this, we're gonna have to redo it. And it's not tremendously fast, even with just, I mean, this is a pretty burly machine, but even with there's like 2 objects in the scene, and it takes this much time to do the bake with the totally default settings. I didn't change anything else. So just out of curiosity, this may damage the stream. I hope it doesn't. In fact, I feel like we should be seeing more dramatic. We could take this off from real time and change it to only baked, I guess. Ooh, that broke. It's rebuilding the light mapping. Let's maybe make a, might be a little easier to see some of this stuff. I don't feel like we're getting a lot of contribution from the environment, like the blue from the sky. Normally, early on, I feel like when you would bake this stuff with kind of default settings, you would see more influence from the sky's color. Let's go back in there. Rendering light setting. Yes, Skybox is the source of environmental lighting. Seems not very blue for whatever reason. So we're baking. It's a process, and you can imagine. It's just because I'm in shadow mask mode. I really just left everything totally default. So that still doesn't look great. That looks like that bake didn't finish. Looks like there's problems. Anyway, let's change it to the GPU mode just because I want to see if it is. So we're preparing the bake. Did that seem faster? Why does this look so bad? It's like I feel like these aren't the normal default settings that you would have seen previously when just thrown on baking. We got low res shadows and all that stuff, but that's fine. Like, I'm kind of surprised to see not more of a blue contribution from the sky. I don't know. We don't need to dive into this. So, did that seem or feel faster? Maybe so. It's a very subjective thing. But that's interesting. With the idea of progressive light mapping, what else could we turn on to see a little more? We could turn on AO, maybe. More. Turn up the contribution. Okay. Yeah, we start to see the ambient occlusion in, and that makes it a little better. So that was actually very quick. That was surprisingly fast. Like changing these AO settings, that was pretty snappy here. What was that? What's that like with the in CPU land? Okay, you can see the progressiveness happen. I like watching progressive renders. That became a thing. So if you're how to summarize this. So the light mapping is like, in terms of like baked texture lighting, it's sort of saying like, okay, we want lighting in our scene, sure, but these things aren't going to move and the lights aren't going to change. So why do lighting calculations? Like, it's kind of a waste on every frame. Why calculate the lighting when you render these things? Why not just kind of bake the light into the texture and show it? And so that's what we end up with here is when you click these objects, you can see they have these light maps associated with them. One for the baked, which is, and then one is for the real time, which is the whole thing with Unity's kind of baked real time. That's this stuff, the real time global illumination. I think I'm describing that correctly. I may not be. But previously it'd be like, well, it's time to bake this. And sometimes it would be like, okay, I have an enormous complex scene. I need to go sort of calculate lighting everywhere and then draw into textures. And that could take hours. There was a project that I was on in end of 2017, just when they were introducing this progressive light mapper stuff, I think, the CPU based. And it could take half an hour or 2 hours, or depending on what was going on in the scene, to do that bake. And so the progressive light mapper, the nice thing about it is previously it'd be like, well, I guess I'm going to push this button and come back in an hour and I hope it looks good. The progressive would be like, well, let's do a bad version and get better and better and better and better. And you would watch the calculations happen and you'd immediately have visual feedback of the changes that you made. Just like, oh, I got immediate visual feedback of the ambient occlusion. And I could tweak settings before kind of committing to fully executing that bake. So what were we doing? We were just going to try this with CPU. So that's sort of interesting. So it's still pretty snappy here. It probably is. These are like horrible tests on such a simple scene to try to decide, how's the performance just based on a cube. Although again, I feel weird about. I just don't feel like we're getting the contribution from the sky that I would expect. This AO also looks horrible. Did I not turn static on both of these? I sure did. And they are set to light map static. I don't know. I would also expect some more red in here. I don't know. Who knows? These are settings that need to be played with. But I feel like in the old default settings, you would kind of get the blue from the sky. Anyway, let's go back to... So I will say in general, I don't know. This may change. Maybe these better workflows will make me sort of change it. Like I'm not... I don't do a ton of baking lighting in Unity. Like if I was going to sort of bake some lighting or bake ambient occlusion and stuff like that, I would tend to do that in a 3D package and then take that in, like just bring those textures in already. But maybe this will kind of change my opinion. I have an upcoming project that maybe I will really want to do all the lighting in Unity. Scene visibility. This is an interesting one. Unity's scene viz controls use Unity's scene viz controls to quickly hide and show objects in the scene view without changing the object's in-game visibility. As the scene becomes more detailed, it often helps to temporarily hide or isolate specific objects, allowing you to view and edit without obstructions. So that's a pretty common thing in 3D packages, is the ability to just show and hide various things either by object or by layer. Obviously, you can do that by disabling the game object or disabling the renderer, but then that disables it in the game view. And if I wanted to say like, oh, I want to work on this cube in isolation in the game view, like I want to be able to say, I mean in the scene view, but in the game view, I want to see the whole thing. So where do we do that? So this is hide or show the component editor tools pop up in the scene. Well, I don't know what that is. Number of hidden objects. What do we think the well, maybe we have to watch this video. Oh, there's straight up visibility settings in the hierarchy. That's pretty cool, actually. I definitely have that set to not visible, so why is it visible? Oh, because I didn't have this enabled, so I could have that on. That's pretty cool. That is an interesting one. I could see that being super useful, because that's just such a common thing in 3D world, and you'd very frequently do that, you know, while working in a project by turning game objects on and off. But I could definitely see the value of separating visibility in the game versus visibility here. That's a pretty interesting one. I don't know. I could see getting into that. The thing that gets a little, I guess, the thing that makes me slightly nervous about that is you're potentially setting yourself up for. You have so many ways to hide a thing. Then you can disable the entire game object, or not. Yeah, set active or inactive, which is this toggle here. Is active or inactive. You can enable or disable the renderer, and now you have this kind of tertiary thing of hiding and showing here. And really, up here you have the ability to do it again. So that's an interesting one, and that's kind of interesting that they would just say like that's a feature. I am seeing some other buttons up here I don't necessarily recognize. Maybe they've been around and I just haven't seen them before. Like gizmos, still gizmos, I assume. Although you can totally toggle gizmos off now. I don't remember that. You can mess with your camera here, that's handy. Are some of these things totally new? I don't feel like I recognize some of these things. I guess we'll see by reading further into the notes. Okay, scene visibility. That's an interesting one. Kind of, I guess I'm a little surprised to see that, because it seems like it's been a long time since Unity made changes just to things like the scene hierarchy UI. Particle improvements. It is now possible to manipulate particle data using the C# job system with no copying of particle data between script and native code. In addition to that, we have also added some improvements to mesh particles, giving you greater control over which meshes are assigned to which particles. I wonder what it means by that. Does that mean, so the job system thing is interesting. That sounds like room for performance improvements with the particle system. I have not gotten into the job system stuff at all. Hope to do that in the near future. What this kind of sounds like to me, and I frankly haven't really done much to this point with mesh-based particles, which just on the particle system in the renderer, instead of doing billboard or any of these other kind of sprite-based particle systems, you can do a mesh, and you can give it a mesh to draw. And so like looking at our default Unity meshes, cube's the easiest, but we could also do a sphere or a capsule or whatever. And you can see that it will draw those. And I believe it instances those and draws them super efficiently. Yeah, because you can even see it's batching them. Like when I have this set to mesh, you can see batching is working with us. Although off the top of my head, I'm not sure if that's exactly the same as instancing. Oh, weird. Strange. Did I set a weird render pipeline? I don't think I did. I think I forgot that when you create a project now, you can say, you can use one of the presets for the render pipelines, I believe. So yeah, we could do this. We could create, well, whatever. Are those lit? Oh, they're just reflecting the environment. How come those reflect the environment and my plane didn't seem like it was? Maybe it's just the material settings on that other thing. Okay, so I don't know quite what they mean by we've added some improvements to mesh particles, giving you greater control over which meshes are assigned to which particles. But I'm a little confused by that, because that almost implied to me that you could have like an array of meshes that you could use, but I don't know that I've seen anything like that. As far as I've seen with the mesh-based particle system, you're like, hey, here's your mesh. Have fun. Oh, enable mesh GPU instancing. Which is interesting. It's still not the same as batching, apparently. So I don't know that you see... Huh. I feel like I'm... Oh, does this need to be running? That would probably make more sense. Okay, those are spewing out. Nothing is saved by batching. I wonder why that was appearing before. So without instancing, do we see any changes here? No. Well, I am using standard shader here. That's not probably the right answer, right? That's so weird to me now that they have the particle shaders with, oh man, that doesn't look good. Particle standard surface. That looks busted. Maybe you're not supposed to do that on particles. Maybe you really are supposed to just use regular materials. That seems weird. Like if I just have an unlit, that looks beautiful and I love it. It looks like, my guess would be that they're storing some data in the vertex colors. Let's see, let's do that. Okay, maybe we were missing some streams there. So this particular shader needs these particular, ooh, look at that, anim frame instanced one. What is that? Is that some kind of weird, I don't think I've seen that before. Shader parameters you can mess with now? Okay, well, I still don't know what that means, what this means. No clue. This one I think is a cool one, actually. It is the Android SDK and NDK installed with Unity Hub. So previously, if you wanted to do Android development, and that's not just for Android phones, that's like for the Oculus Go or any other Android-based device that you wanted to target with Unity, you had to have a existing functioning Android environment, Android development environment set up on that machine, and then you would just point Unity to that. Like previously, as it probably still exists actually, well, where's that going to be now? It used to be in preferences, I think. In preferences, maybe since I didn't install the Android SDK. You know, I quickly installed this and didn't install Android SDK, so it may not be here. But previously, you would have to point to your local installation of the Android SDK. And this is pretty handy. It means that when you install a version of Unity with the Android build support, you can also install everything that goes with it. And I like that. That sounds handy. That also sounds better. I mean, it's, you know, the iOS development in Unity is a whole different thing, because you can't build something for iOS in Unity. All you can do is from Unity build an Xcode project and then have to build it again, which has always kind of sucked. But this is nice. This just seems like a nice, convenient feature, especially if you're like, I don't need to maintain Android development tools on this computer because I'm not doing any stock Android development. Maybe, you know, and so I could just pair that with this. So this, I think that's a nice thing. Android build support comes with its own Java runtime based on OpenJDK. Okay, cool. Andrew Android Logcat integration package. That's awesome. So for those of you that don't know, ADB, what is that? Let's see if I get this right. Android device bridge. I can't remember. It's a way that if you're developing on an Android device, that you can still talk to that device. Usually and by default, I think that happens over USB. You can also do it over TCP. Maybe there's other magical ways. I don't know. But it's a way that you, while developing for your Android device, can still talk to the software, usually for debugging, I would say. Previously, some things you could still get back into Unity with Android development. You could set it up and still connect to it and get like your Unity logs and stuff. But very frequently, you would have to separately open some terminal or command prompt or whatever and run ADB logcat, which is how you dump the log of whatever you're running on the Android device. And this looks like a package that brings that into Unity, which is pretty cool. And it looks like it has filtering and regex and a lot of other stuff. So I could definitely see this making Android development better on Unity. And again, it's weird for me to be excited about that because I don't develop anything for Android in the way that you may normally think, like Android phones, but I've built stuff for the Gear VR and the Oculus Go, and those are Android-based devices, so that's handy. This next one, this is the one, maybe. This maybe is the one that's the most interesting to me. I don't know. This is maybe the most interesting to me through the lens of the project I just finished, because one of the major problems for developing for something like the Oculus Go, or the Gear VR is maybe actually worse, is like you build in Unity and you work in Unity, but there's only you can only reach a certain level of kind of environmental parity between your Windows build environment or Mac build environment and your Android environment where it's actually going to run. And for the most part, Unity's pretty good. Like it's like, yeah, what I get here is what I get there, but there's different hardware. Plugins may perform totally differently, like different code will actually run. And that was a big problem we had on this last project, was there were just certain major portions of the application that kind of didn't run in Windows or weren't available in Windows and were only available on the Android device. So we had very frequently had to do builds, and those builds were pretty slow. Like the build and deploy loop was not crazy. It was a few minutes, but like when you have multiple developers doing that multiple times a day, that time adds up. And you could say like, well, half an hour or an hour of developer work was just lost today because people were waiting for the build to happen. And there's, of course, build strategies around that. But what this seems to offer is this idea of, instead of just having the ability to build and run on Android, you can patch and run. So yeah, they mentioned build and run, and they say, we have extended this feature. Now it allows you to patch the app package on target devices instead of rebuilding and redeploying it. So when you're iterating on your C# code, only recompiled libraries are sent to the device. That's pretty cool. Like if you're at the point that you're just tweaking code or doing code fixes and everything else stays the same, it's such a waste of time to repackage and redeploy the application. So this is a good step. I think this is a pretty handy step. What's maybe missing here that I would like to see is, and I've built sort of weird ad hoc fake solutions for this, but the idea of, okay, this is a great way to iterate on code, but what if you want to iterate on inspector settings or other things like that? Like you could build your own networked tooling to do that, but it would be kind of cool to have Unity support that in some way, like a remote editor mode where you can connect to the application that's running live and still be able to edit certain things on it. That would be pretty amazing. Maybe that should be a library. Maybe I should sell that and get rich. So this is a handy thing. I'm interested to see how this works. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind. Maybe this is actually the thing, because the editor, the console is such an essential part of building an application. And this last big project I was on, of course, all of the developers were dumping a lot of stuff to the console, a lot of debug messages. And we were even doing different colors for the logging, but the the problem is it just becomes untenable at a certain point. Like there's too much to manage. And so the idea of being able to filter is, if it's working in the way that I'm imagining, could be amazing. So like if I can go to the console, yeah, it kind of seems like I can, and just search. Now, funny, it doesn't seem as robust as this console, which seems to have regular expression searching. Clear on play, clear on build, error pause. Is this what you're connected to? So if you can use this to search, man, this might change my life. Just the search bar in the console might be the biggest feature. Let's see. Let's just make, what would be a good way to test this? I guess we just make a nonsense script that spams the console. Spam. Visual Studio going to be mad because I'm 2019ing. So we will just do a debug.log. Wow. Why did it take that long to type 2 characters? Visual Studio Code. Slow. Cool. Great. What's wrong with you? What are you talking about? I have 4.7.2 installed, don't I? Don't I? Don't look at my installed programs, it's private. I have 4.7.1 installed. When did 4.7.2 come out? Is that new? Is this another new thing? Is this just a day of new things? So we need the like SDK, right? Or the whatever the targeting. When did this come out? I feel like I just got this. April? How did I? Okay, that's on me then, apparently. Maybe I followed a bad link. Well, sure. Give me the developer pack. Does this have everything I need in it? Okay, great. Well, that was a good little diversion. Anyways, we don't need, that's okay. So we will have whatever nonsense we wrote. My bad. And we will just spam the log incessantly. Wow. That's pretty good. No regular expressions. Not case sensitive. Okay, so it's not a very robust search, it seems, but this still, that's a, I don't know that I knew you could add timestamps in there. Well, look at all this stuff. I don't know. Maybe I've just never noticed this stuff before. Look at that. Let's just, how many lines can I add? Give me 10 lines. It doesn't know what to add. It only knows about 3 lines. Okay, well, that was maybe, what was the default? Was it 2? UI elements debugger. What the heck is that? We're getting ahead of ourselves apparently. Okay, well, anyway. Searchable console log, man, that would have changed lives on the last project I was on, no question. By the end of it, we had so much logging that we were all just sort of manually like logging errors and logging warnings because that was the only way to filter previously. With this logging, like you can say, show me messages, show me warnings, show me errors, but now you can search the console. So that is huge. I'm gonna maybe call that my new favorite 2019 feature so far. That's pretty impressive. Look at this button. What does that mean? Custom editor tools. What does that mean? Okay, great. Timeline signals. Timeline signals are an easy way for Timeline to interact with objects in the scene using a signal emitter and a signal asset. You can trigger a signal receiver in a game object that will define a set of pre-configured reactions to your timeline. So what this looks like at a glance are those little markers that you could previously put on animation clips that sucked and were so annoying to use. Like borderline unusable. I never liked that workflow. So it looked like this. You would have like, if we created an animation and then we went in the animation editor, you could put these animation events is what they were called. And then you could give these events, you could tell it a function to call and give it some parameter. But man, it was just not, it was super, it's one of those things that I think had been in Unity forever and just was like kind of not a great idea, but a legacy thing that got carried forward. So the idea of having a robust way in Timeline to manually, so that's a little weird. Why is there an emitter and a receiver? So using a signal emitter and a signal asset. So is a signal asset like a pre-configured reactions to your timeline? Well, let's just try this. So let's make a timeline. See if we can figure this out. And let's put that timeline on the cube. And let's look at our timeline. And let's put the cube in the timeline with an activation track. So how do I make signals? Add a signal emitter. So I have a signal emitter, so I can give it a time. Retroactive presumably means if you jump to it, that it will still happen. Emit once, emit signal, cool. So your project contains no signal asset. So let's create a signal called new signal. So it's going to emit something called new signal. So what does that look like? Is there anything in here about signals? Yeah, you can make a signal right there. Make a new signal. Okay, I'm still confused. So when I go back here, I'm gonna emit new signal. But when I go look at the signal asset, oh, do I have to write code here? I thought it was gonna be, I mean, that's okay. I thought go wild and create your own. So this whole thing with this, well, what's a signal receiver? Receiver component. So signal emitter. Who's the signal emitter? Custom signal event drawer. So do I need to put a signal emitter? Where my, it's a little confusing. So the emitter, I see. It looks like the emitter. Okay. So can I just drag this in and make a signal track? Yeah, add a signal track. Okay, so now I'm gonna have a signal receiver on that object. And I can add a reaction. This is actually really cool. So this is great, actually. You know what? This is great. I love this because this is something that was missing from Timeline. Timeline was really good at sequencing durations of behavior, like a bunch of animations. It was not good, really, in my opinion, at discrete momentary events. And I had faked it a little bit with like an activation track or something and then doing code in the on enable. But this means you can just add a signal here. Did I accidentally make two emitters on this? I had the receiver. This thing is gonna emit signal, new signal 1 cube. So it looks like I can maintain this here or on the cube itself, which is handy. And then the reaction is just whatever I want on. Oh, well, that's weird. Oh, so when this signal happens, I'm gonna, okay, interesting. So this is the signal I'm reacting to. This is the game object that I will, so let's do a couple things. Let's ditch this, and we can ditch this. And we're just gonna say that when I get, what is this gonna be, like 3 seconds in? When I get this signal, let's turn the cube off, I guess. So we'll just do a game object set active false. What if we can pass parameters? It seems like you can, because it seems like signals were customizable, but by default it looks like they don't really know anything. But presumably you could have signal assets that also took parameters. It does say fully customizable, go wild and do my own. Okay, so we're gonna say set active false. So in our timeline, which I hope I set to display, after 3 seconds, it disables. That is great. That's great. Because that was a dumb, I mean, maybe there was a way to do it better before. I didn't know what it was. One, this feels like a little over-engineered. It seems a little weird to have like this secondary signal system, whatever, but hey, this is Unity's new approach to things. But that you could have these discrete event kinds of things on the old kind of animation, but not in the new timeline. So I'm actually super into that. I sort of feel like I should be writing a list of things that I love. Console filtering, big deal. Signals, big deal. That's a big deal. That is gonna, at least for the way that I want to use timeline, that's pretty awesome. Cool. Okay, other changes and improvements. 2019.1 beta also includes support for H.265 video transcoding, NVIDIA's OptiX AI denoiser. I don't have any idea what that is. An AI denoiser? What? Are we denoising AI, or are we using AI to denoise? It looks like we're using AI to denoise. Maybe? The right side has AI accelerated denoising active. The left side does not. Oh, whoa. Well, that's actually pretty amazing. So for this like progressive, when you're doing things like progressive light mapping and you're in that like mode of generating the light map, you know, like I described before, you start rough and it gradually gets better. But if you want it to be noise free, you're potentially gonna have to let it run for hours. Man, that's pretty cool. It gets a little blobby, but maybe that's just the video encoding. That's impressive. Man, that's pretty cool. Is that for the light mapper, or is that something that can just run like... Okay, well, OpenGL ES 3.2 and multiple important sampling of environments with CPU light mapper. I don't actually know what that means. It's weird that these are grouped together. I wonder how this is used. If this is part of the light map calculation, or if it can be a runtimey thing. Cool. We'll find a complete list of new features and improvements in the release notes page. So yeah, we'll check that out. We'll go to the release notes page and go through this in a little more detail. macOS and Ubuntu versions has changed. Existing project, look at the upgrade guide. Yeah, we can look at that because it might be easy to see what has changed. Get early access to new features. We already got the beta. Cool. So actually, I want to just look at the upgrade guide because I'm curious. Upgrading to Unity 2019. Because sometimes these guides will show you, well, never mind. I'm going to say sometimes these guides show you like what's different. Prior to 2019, indirect intensity slider only affected light maps when using the progressive light mapper for enlightenment, etc., etc., etc. It's best to clear the baking data prior to baking light. That's again after the update. So that's an easy enough thing. Maybe that's why the default light looked weird to me. It didn't look really the way it looked in the old days. It looked brighter, but maybe a little worse to me. Like it wasn't. Again, like it wasn't including the blue from the sky. Anyway, all right, known issues. I'm sure everything's broken. Package manager problems. Scriptable object file name does not match. Ooh, editor crash. Slider node. I didn't know this. Yeah, this didn't talk much about rendering stuff. XR linear color spray issues. Okay. So, and I wasn't really keeping track of any of this stuff. Yeah, man, Ben, there's stuff in here that is serious stuff. In fact, there's two things that are amazing. The most amazing, that's going to blow your mind right now. I don't know if you're ready for this. You can search in the console now. So when we do stuff like everybody's doing a trillion different multicolored debug logs, now you can actually search for things and have that search filter continue while logging continues. Life changer. Life changer. What was the other thing I liked? There are two other things I liked. There's this weird thing now with showing and hiding objects only in the scene view and not the game view. There is another big one was being able to patch Android builds. Instead of having to do a full build every single time, you can patch the binary on the device. There's an interface. Yeah, I know. There's an interface for Logcat in Unity now. Shortcut manager. Your incremental garbage collection is, I don't know what's different because it was already preview, but maybe it's more now. Where was that other thing? Yeah, this thing, this patching thing for Android seems pretty serious. Like instead of just a build and run, you can do a patch and run. And it seems like it will patch it on the device. So that could be huge for iteration on stuff like the Oculus Go. And then the thing I was just getting really excited about is this thing, this timeline signals thing, because I don't think there was a way, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think there was a way to easily have like discrete signals sent from the timeline. Like you'd have durations and stuff could happen in those durations and you could write custom playables and all that stuff. But kind of before, if you wanted to say like, hey, when you hit this point in the timeline, do this thing, it was a little annoying. So now you have this like signal, what they call signals, that get dispatched on the timeline and then can call whatever behavior you want, seemingly, on a signal receiver, which is just something you stick on a game object. So that thing is cool. Oh, is that part of addressables? Are signals addressables? Is that how that works? What namespace were these in? Wait, no, can I look at the... A signal asset is a scriptable object. I don't know, is this different than addressables? I don't know what addressables are. Anyway, we had just finished the main stuff. We were then going through this upgrade guide, which contains almost nothing except a pretty picture. Android hit swap stuff. Excuse me? Hot swap, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay, new entries since the last alpha. So we made it to alpha 14. I really wonder what, I'm not really expecting 2019 to be available out of beta until April or May, unfortunately, which is kind of a bummer, but I'm thinking that's what's going to happen. Unity video player can be used with Vulkan, so that's probably a nice video performance. New Vuforia version. I used to do a fair amount of Vuforia work, but have not messed with it in a while. New API stuff in the editor. Interesting. Remove mono behaviors with missing script. Get mono behaviors with missing. That's kind of cool. So you can look for bad stuff going on in the scene. Async shader compilation better in the editor. All these fixes. Look at all this 2D stuff for Ben. GPU skinning. So I'm a little disappointed, I guess, to not see what looks like rendering changes, but maybe now that all that stuff's going on in the rendering pipeline packages, those don't count as editor release features. It's kind of weird how fragmented that stuff is. Package manager stuff. So these are really just deltas between the last alpha, right? Yeah. So I don't know that this is worth diving in. Here's the preview of the final release notes. Android notch support, great. Set sustained performance mode. OpenGL's, I have no clue what's new in OpenGL ES 3.2. I have not everything I need to know. I mean, I would assume performance stuff would be my general guess, but I haven't checked it out. Package patching, yeah, that seems really cool. I wonder if that's going to end up anywhere else. Right now, it seemingly is only on Android. I guess I could see it working on Windows. I probably will never work on iOS, since you always have Xcode between you and like the final build process. Select, unselect all gizmos. Yeah, so that one was cool. In the gizmos visibility pop-up, I think we ran into that accidentally. That seems to be what this is. Like, that seems like I'm enabling and disabling all gizmos, which I like, because sometimes gizmos get in your way. I think that's what that one is. C# 7.3 directives. Editor Tools API. Yeah, what the heck is this thing? This one also seems pretty interesting for custom tooling. Allow users to create new tools that behave like native tools. A new button is added to the toolbar to display custom tools. Additionally, a new display in the scene view now shows the available custom tools. Yeah, so we saw that. That's this button. Not that button. That's this button. Opens this custom tools thing. But I saw no indication of how that works. So hopefully there will be some examples or documentation for that stuff, because I have not seen. I don't know how to do it. Yeah, that scene view camera settings is handy. So that is new. Sounds like this little guy. You can dynamic clipping. Whoa, what's that? Dynamic clipping. Okay, the real camera is that you still set it, but seemingly the scene camera. Oh, this is messing with the scene camera separate from the game camera. So that's, you've never been able to do that before. What's my clipping like? What if I get way in here? That's pretty close. Maybe closer than I would expect to be useful. Okay, there's our clip. The dynamic clipping. Okay, that's interesting. Assembly definition files. Text-based filtering. This is the one. This is the, oof. Give that guy a raise, whoever did that. Call stack now clickable. Hyperlinks will take you to the source code for any function calls listed in the stack. That's pretty cool. So that, if I'm understanding that, the whole stack trace is clickable. Not just the end of the stack of, you know, wherever the error happened. Like you can go anywhere in it. I think that's what that means. Exposed advanced dropdown API for searchable add component like dropdowns. So the add component dropdown is this, which has this thing, and you can search, and it's hierarchical. So seemingly they have added an API where developers can add that themselves to do something like that themselves for their tools. That's handy. log when the CS project gets written to the disk. Makes it easier to figure out why CS projects are getting reloaded in C# IDEs. Messages are prefixed. Okay, so that could be interesting, especially when insane things happen with Visual Studio Code for seemingly no reason. Maybe that would help indicate why. On-demand shader compilation async. A replacement shader into the actual shader variant is available. Async shader compilation. Okay, so that just means, I think, so shaders will, if you make an edit to a shader and switch back to Unity, I think Unity automatically always recompiles. You can also do this compile. Excuse me, was that asynchronous though? Because it like still popped up a little dude. Let's just add some nonsense in here and save it and switch. That's okay. So we have that moment of the replacement shader, which seemed to be that blue flicker that we saw. I don't know if I like that or not. I never felt, well, okay, maybe this is just me, that my shaders aren't complex enough to care if the shader rendering was asynchronous, because I felt like for simple-ish shaders, it was more or less instantaneous, but oh, the keyboard shortcut configuration. We didn't even look at that. So I assume that will be in maybe in the preferences. No, shortcuts. Ben's going to love this one. Although, unfortunately, the number 2 is already taken. Toggle 2D mode. So assigned keys versus global keys. Stage or prefab mode. So this is good. Maybe I need to just look at this and figure out like every Unity shortcut that I don't know that I should know. That seems pretty good. Pre-checkout and pre-submit user-specific callbacks for version control system integration. I know. Oh, well, that's what I was talking about a little earlier. So Ben's saying, yeah, it makes it, the more you customize your things like keyboard shortcuts, stuff like that, the harder it is to switch to another computer. And at a certain point, like especially when I was getting into working in studios and having to sit down at other people's computers all the time, that's kind of when I stopped customizing anything and just using like bare metal stuff. I still have continual problems with Unity when sitting at somebody else's machine in terms of where they put their hierarchy relative to their project, because people put it in the wrong place, of course. My default is to go to layout, wide, and then drag game here. And that's my default way to set up Unity so that you have hierarchy left, project right, and I always, almost always, switch to one column because I kind of hate the 2 column. And 1 column is what Unity used to be. This is my preferred Unity layout, but people do crazy things. And anytime I sit down at someone's computer who has the project and hierarchy backwards, I immediately break everything. So yeah, now their shortcuts are also going to be different. So it's going to be bad. Maybe there can be like some version controlled set of layouts so you can sit at people's computers and put it in Scott mode or whatever. I already lost the thing. That was under edit shortcuts. So this seems pretty handy. Look at that grid painting, brush, grid painting, decrease Z. Oh, that's all 2D stuff. I wonder how this plays in with bigger packages like ProBuilder that I assume has a lot of its own key bindings. Vertex snapping. That's stuff I just don't use that I need to use that. So do you hold V down to turn it on? I like that. That's how C4D does snapping. I don't think Maya does it like that. The fact that I don't know probably says that it doesn't work the way that I want it to. Script recompiles triggered by in-control and Unity systems are now logged to the editor. Script compilation, so that's handy. Like just more clarity on what's going on in your project. A bunch of global illumination. Seems like the GPU light mapper is a bigger thing. Importance sampling. I actually don't know what importance sampling means. Sounds important. That denoiser looked cool. It's a deep learning based denoiser trained. So I wonder if this is kind of the first. I think it maybe is. This may be the first like core Unity feature that is AI based, which is pretty interesting because you know that's just going to be, that stuff is just going to become more and more prevalent. Like eventually you'll never outline things in Photoshop because an AI will do it or whatever. Like it's just going to be all these kind of brute forcey or grunt kind of tasks I think will move towards machine learning. And so seeing that in Unity for a pretty core feature is interesting. So it's only on Windows with a compatible NVIDIA GPU. I wonder what that means. Whether it needs to be a 2000 series or if even older NVIDIA GPUs can do that. Double-sided GI, shadow casting, cool. Graphics world, GPU format, support of any GPU formats for render texture. I wonder what that means. I feel like when you create a render texture, you have flexibility to say, oh, that's way more. Okay. This is more than I recall. So now I guess when you create a render texture, you can create, is this like any possible format or only what your GPU supports? Man, this scrolls. Okay. Well, that's kind of interesting. But how do you know? Like, again, is it my GPU? How do I know? Especially if I'm like targeting an Android device and what its GPU supports. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Interface to pass camera buffers from scriptable render pipeline to the VFX graph so that screen space behaviors can be used. That's pretty handy. So the visual effects graph is, I think, still in preview package mode, and I've barely touched it at all because I have not really been able to use it because it has not been very robust. Whoa, the shader graph 532, and it's not even marked as preview. Lightweight render pipeline also not marked as preview in 2019. That's pretty cool. But we probably do need. Where do we say use preview packages? Show preview packages. The shader graph is out of preview, it looks like. I wonder if they freaking added stencil buffer support to it. Because in my heart, the shader graph is not finished until they add that. This changelog is stencil. No, come on. Okay, that's too bad. Too bad. Draclin, what is going on? What did I do? Did I do something? What did Scott do this time? Streamed again? I did do that. Okay, unfortunately, I don't want to dive through that, but it looks like it maybe doesn't do the thing that I want it to do. However, the visual effects graph, this guy, so it looks like they just added some room for better interoperability between stuff you can do in custom render pipelines and the visual effects graph, which makes a lot of sense, but that's annoying from my perspective because I'm currently blocked on doing on doing anything in the shader graph because of the way it relates to the scriptable render pipeline and the fact that I'm using stencil buffers. I am going, so Draclin, Unity 2019.1 beta, the first beta came out today. And so I'm just going through the patch notes and talking about all the new stuff. There's some things I'm very excited about. There's some things I'm excited about just like I'm immediately ready to use because they'll be awesome. And there's some things that I'm like anticipating being useful for some upcoming projects. So we went through all like the high level patch notes and now I'm just going line by line through the patch notes looking for cool stuff. I would love more like this, more examples and stuff like that in the visual effects graph because at least up to this point. Maybe that stuff's out there now. I don't feel like I've seen much of it, but it's for composing visual effects in a handy way, in a node-based way like the shader graph. And I feel like I haven't seen enough examples to really know how to use it yet. Maybe we'll do a stream one day and just dive into that thing. Okay, so that seems cool. So now you can do depth collision, stuff like that. API support for entire constant buffer contents at once. Material set constant buffer. I don't know what a constant buffer is. Sounds cool. Set global constant buffer. Is that something I could use instead of a stencil buffer? What is a constant buffer? Vertex shader constant data. Okay, that's a thing. I just don't know what it is. Let's look into that someday. But apparently you can set the entire constant buffer contents. Okay, interesting. So it's a shadery thing. I guess we got to figure that out. Dynamic resolution feature. I haven't played with that very much. That's a cool thing. It's a weird thing. I like it in general. Like the general idea. What's the first game that I saw this on? I feel like it's a thing that's emerged, like adaptive resolution from the last few years. Is I think that's what this is talking about. Where if you are hitting some kind of performance bottleneck, like the normal thing would be like, well, I guess we're just going to drop frames right now. And this is if this is the thing I'm thinking of, basically says, rather than dropping frames, let's just recognize that we're getting into some kind of bottleneck and drop the resolution, because maybe that will be less of a compromise. Escape from Tarkov. Is that a good game? I think I might have that game. Last year in creative, yes, I would agree. Last year when I was streaming, I did organically pick up more viewers in creative. Maybe I should move to art. I don't know. I'm actually pretty torn on that, on what's the right place to put things. I know, Draklin, you are my Twitch expert, absolutely. So I'm very open to any suggestions. My current plan is that we're going to come up with some amazing idea for that Twitch extension contest and then win the Twitch extension contest. And by virtue of winning the Twitch extension contest, get a lot of viewers. So all I have to do is make an amazing thing, and it'll be great. What's my Steam password? Well, shoot. Okay, I'll check later if I have Tarkov. Oh, it's a shooter. I don't know about shoot people games. Oh, it's not on Steam. Wait. Oh, it's just a Unity game. Okay, got it. Where did I see that? I wonder if that was in a Humble Bundle that I got. Or is it free? Why do I know? Okay. Anyway, I will look into Escape from Tarkov. I generally don't like shoot people games, although I do want to play Metro Exodus just because those games are so weird and atmospheric. So, Draklin, I'm supposed to be doing patch notes and you're sending me cool stuff. Okay, well, I'll watch the video. There have been some gorgeous. My favorite Unity game is probably Inside. There's been some astoundingly gorgeous games done in Unity. This is sort of like a meditative, atmospheric trailer for a shooter. Have you played the Metro games? Do you like weird Russian shooting games? Then you might like the Metro games. They're not good shooting games, but again, since I don't like shooting people, it doesn't really bother me. just such weird atmospheric worlds. Are you excited about Exodus? Yeah, maybe. And the weird thing that Exodus, what a crazy thing in the news recently. So there was a weird thing where I think it was the publisher and not the developer, if I remember correctly, made a deal with Epic that they weren't going to have Metro Exodus, which launches in a few weeks, isn't going to launch on Steam, even though it's been on Steam available for pre-order for some time. And they seemingly have to honor those orders. So they're still going to ship a Steam version. They're just not selling it there anymore. And so there's some small subset of users that will have it, and we'll get DLC and updates. Apparently it's a timed exclusive for 1 year on the Epic Store. But what was really crazy is there was like I think something like a 3-hour window between that announcement and when sales actually stopped. And enough people were like, oh crap, I want this game and I want it on Steam. I have to buy it right now. So there was a window apparently where Metro Exodus was the top selling game on Steam just because everybody was rushing to get it there. I kind of thought about doing that, but I think I'm going to play it on console, I think. Russians are the coolest military people. In the Metro world, I would maybe agree with that. Okay, what else were we doing? We went to the Global Illumination. We saw that crazy GI stuff. We were looking at graphics now. So dynamic resolution stuff. Frame Debugger now supports the scriptable render pipeline Batcher. I don't even know what the SRP Batcher is. I should probably learn that. Sparse texture support on Vulkan stuff. Vulkan's like the open, close to the, so Apple came up with Metal. That was their close to the Metal graphics API that was supposed to be more performant than OpenGL. Vulkan was sort of the open answer to that, and Vulkan is common on Android, but I think it's also on Windows, maybe some other places. Linux too, maybe. I have not done really much with Vulkan or Metal other than just check a checkbox in Unity. Internal support for lossless texture compression API, a new feature on iOS 12 with A12 plus GPU hardware. That's interesting. Only one iOS note in all of the 2019.1 patch notes. Rendering Unity on top of native UI on iOS and tvOS. So that's kind of interesting. I think that's a thing that comes up a fair amount. So now that we're, especially in like marketing, branding, brand world, where you have these brands that already have an app out, like whatever, say it's Reebok or somebody, and there's already an app, and they're like, oh, I want to add some cool AR experience to my app that already has a user base. And then the answer is like, well, you could do all that with like ARKit from scratch, or you could use something like Unity, which would probably make it easier to build. But then there's this thing like, well, what? Now are we going to ship our original app and a Unity app? Or are we going to try to integrate Unity into our existing app? And so this reads as some more options for being able to combine those two worlds, a native application and a Unity. So that sounds interesting. Wide gamut color for Vulkan and OpenGL. Yes. Package manager. A package manifest inspector. Okay. Jobs on particles. Sounds good performance-wise. We've got some physicsy stuff. Gravity for cloth simulation. I've actually never done cloth sim in Unity. Closest point to a collider. That's interesting. I feel like I've done that before, but maybe it was in a slow way. So a native way to do that's handy. Networking stuff. So this is a great Unity editor .experimental .networking .player connection .editor GUI layout .attach to player dropdown. Great. One-stop solution to display and change the player the editor is attached to. So that is this thing. Is that here? What you're attached to here? Or in the profiler? I'm not exactly sure. The player the editor is attached to. Great. I don't know what that means really. Yes. Incremental garbage collection on Universal Windows Platform. Incremental garbage to avoid garbage collection spikes. I'm excited about that. That seems like that's going to be very handy. Added new user variant directive shader feature local and multi-compile locally that do not contribute towards the global keyword count. Okay. I've never run into problems with that, but I'm sure people who write complex shaders do. Wow, blend weights and blend indices in vertex shaders. Okay. I've not done anything personally with, like, I assume that's for blend shapes, like Morphe stuff, and I've never done that. That's cool. If you could mess with that on the fly in the shaders yourself. Track level animation. I don't know exactly what that means, but new timeline features are welcome. Signals are cool. That's cool. Markers maybe were just, I don't know that markers came. I saw markers in there, but it didn't seem like they came with, or is signal just the only kind of marker at this moment? Or is there, what if there's some functionality of just sort of markers of like, for reference, like they are in many other applications? Timeline has moved to be a built-in package. That's cool. That is cool news, because that means that that timeline can be iterated on separate from the editor, which in general, I think that is a thing I like. We will see if I actually like that, but I think that is something long-term that I'm going to be into, is the idea of Unity features as SRP, scriptable render pipeline. Wait, what did I say? Is that not right? Did I say something wrong? Did I say SRB or something in this context? Whatever I said, that's what I meant. The scriptable render pipeline, which so far I've only really used the lightweight render pipeline. Okay, a progress bar control. That's handy. Background image can now be... oh, okay. Oh, was that when you were talking? Okay. Sorry, I should pay more attention to chat. We're so close to the end of this list. What something SRP was. Oh, I know scriptable render pipeline, but that was something related to it, I think, that I did not know what it meant. The batcher. I did not know what the batcher is. I know what the frame debugger is. I don't know what the batcher is. So we'll see. Unless that's like its logic for batching, like you know, when Unity saves, you know, when you're looking at stats. Actually, that's probably what it is. When it's deciding the batches to draw. Actually, that probably makes total sense. Universal Windows Platform, ARM64 for Windows. So that's kind of an interesting thing. That is interesting to me for the following reason, because this may not be what this is for at all, but I know there's like some version of, or there was, I don't know if it exists anymore, some version of Windows that would run on a Raspberry Pi. And it would be kind of cool to build Unity applications for that, although Raspberry Pi would not be a great platform for something GPU intensive, but some clone might be. H.265 support, that's handy. And WebAssembly, streaming instantiation, experimental multi-threading support. So some new WebGL stuff is good to see. I used to be so focused on WebGL, and now I don't deal with it very much. Okay, so that's cool. There's good stuff in here. I feel it's like a little weird that they don't talk about rendering a little more, but maybe that's because that's relegated to the render pipelines and the render pipeline packages, and that they will have their own release notes. That's going to be a little hard to manage now. That's one thing that I don't know. So there's this thing, you know, like once you make it past to a certain point in a project, you're like, well, I'm not going to upgrade Unity because that would be a disaster, because who knows what would break. And so I like the idea of saying, well, like, I just want this one new feature. I just want Android Logcat or whatever. So I'm 90%, 100%. Wait, that was a weird way to say that. I'm 90% fully behind the idea of everything being a package, but it just seems like it's going to be difficult to manage all these change logs. Like, okay, time to go see what's new in the timeline, for example. I wonder what Unity's strategy is going to be for collating all of that information. Pretty curious about that. Look at all these things. So many packages, Unity. Pretty impressive. Immediate window. Rapidly edit and debug code. What are any of these things? An animation rigging toolkit using C# jobs. AR Foundation is sort of their cross-platform AR solution that does AR Kit and AR Core and may also wrap Vuforia. So you use, instead of having to write platform-specific stuff, if you're targeting Android and iOS, for example, I think you can use AR Foundation. Sprite Shape. Look at all these fancy things. Oh, there's the vector thing too. Where's that thing? Vector graphics. That's still preview 1.0.0. What else? What else? What else? Backwards compatibility, breaking changes. Who cares? We're going to move forward. Resolution options, a little bit of stuff for iOS. Also a little surprised that there's not much iOS stuff happening. That news, there was that news of like Apple having like a Netflix for games, which is so weird. Like there's all this talk of who's going to be the first with the Netflix for games, which is very strange to me because Microsoft has had Game Pass for some time, which is kind of a Netflix for game. PlayStation has PlayStation. Oh, which one is it? Is it Now? I mix up all their branding where you can. Well, no, that one wasn't a flat fee. So maybe really Game Pass. Maybe Game Pass is the one. But there's talk of Apple doing it. But I have zero confidence with Apple with game. Apple and gaming. Apple has never understood games. I feel like it never will. They just don't. As a company, and a company that was for a time like the biggest game platform in the universe, when in that era that the App Store was meant something, which I don't think it does as much anymore. Before all games got to what they are now, which is like unplayable garbage microtransaction machines, like when it was like games that you cared about and mattered came out on iOS. Apple just did not know how to deal with that. Although I did see some news for like MFI supported controllers, which I feel like is fully driven by Fortnite and maybe PUBG. Okay, well, cool. I did see actually improvements. So I don't know if we want to dive deep into the improvements. A key store's dedicated location. Not my favorite strategy, Ben, to pay, or pay to play, or play to pay. Or I just like to maybe just buy a thing and play it. Let's see. All these things look like maybe minor quality of life-ish things. ProGuard mapping. Oh, improved player startup, 200 milliseconds. Sure. Yeah, the Vulkan renderer with the video player, that seems like Unity is weirdly the de facto, I feel like, 3D video player. Like I feel like there's tons of 3D video players that are under the hood based on Unity just because that seems like the easiest way to do it. Animation World has new stuff. Aligned all animator state machine nodes on the grid. Really? It's like they read that out of my heart. They read that out of my OCD heart. Because previously, man, this used to drive me insane. I think I even have complained about this on stream before, that the animation, when you have an animator controller and you go into your state machine, it shows this nice grid here, and then these little boxes did not fit to the grid, and it ruined my life. But Now they do. Wow. What a hyper-specific thing that seems like it was made just for me. Same thing with states. So states still aren't the same size, which is goofy. But, man, yeah, they really fit in the grid now. Even this weird one? Even that weird one. That looks like bad rendering there, though. That doesn't look good. Okay, well, great. That's maybe my new feature, then, is that they align to the grid. I assume that's what that's for, because I'm pretty sure they didn't match up in a way that used to drive me crazy. Maybe I'm crazy? Avatar Builder, animation jobs. Upgraded the animation window preview playback engine to use the Playable API. So that's cool. Playable API was introduced sometime in the 2017 world, maybe. And so seems like they've kind of been refactoring various animation things to use that world. Cameras in a SketchUp importer. I didn't even know there was a SketchUp importer, actually. That's kind of cool for SketchUp people. Optimized mesh stuff. Better compression. Asset pipeline. Scriptable objects are loaded before a refresh import. Okay, so better scriptable asset stuff. Draklin, you are. Okay, Draklin is a SketchUp Pro and is going to take advantage of that. Yeah, I didn't know that existed. That's actually pretty cool. I wonder if it works in kind of the same way as I wonder if I like that. So the way the C4D importer and the Maya importer work is that it's not like they natively support those files. At least with C4D, I'm pretty sure this is the case with Maya, that you have to have those packages installed, and it like uses your local install of that software to just create an FBX. At least I'm pretty sure that's how that used to work. Okay, scriptable object stuff. This means that after the refresh, we'll have the modified values from modified assets. Okay, that seems slightly specific, but maybe that's something that I would actually find helpful. Okay, so the command buffer stuff, is that from compute shaders? Is that why I don't know? No, that was a constant buffer we saw before. Command buffers. I have done almost nothing with compute shaders. I'm pretty interested in it, in trying to like offset stuff to GPU world, but I don't know a ton about them at this moment. Maybe we should have a compute shader stream. I assume that's what this is talking about. Okay, all this editor stuff, clear on build to the console, which is kind of cool. Just making that separate from the clear on play. Shortcut profile on the shortcut manager. Field of view access selection drop down on the camera inspector. What does that mean? Field of view, the field of view. Oh. Okay, that's actually pretty cool. So previously, so when you talk about a camera's field of view, it's like a fixed number, right? So in this case, we have we're 60 FOV. The problem is that gets confusing if you have different aspect ratios, right? Like, yeah, I can be 60 FOV here, but what's going on horizontally, because that's going to vary based on the horizontal size of the window. In this case, where the FOV axis is vertical. So when you were doing math related to things like aspect ratios, this is at least where it comes into mind for me, you would have to be cognizant of the fact that Unity was sort of vertical focused, and that when you were changing an FOV, you were changing the vertical FOV, because the horizontal was like, who knows? It could change based on what was happening here. You can see that in that when I change the vertical height of this window, you see like, oh, it's like I'm actually sort of changing what is available to me to see. Whereas when I change horizontally, I'm just kind of covering and uncovering. Whereas I bet if I flip this thing, we'll get kind of the opposite reaction. No, maybe if I change this. That still doesn't seem quite what I imagined. Okay, maybe that doesn't work quite like I expected. Anyway, changing FOV But that seems like what the numbers still would be. So 60 FOV horizontal versus 60 FOV vertical. So that's interesting. I feel like that math isn't too hard to do, but I can imagine, especially on a mobile device that you're expecting to rotate, that could be a handy thing. I like all these. There's lots of little editor stuff that they're adding. Keyboard shortcut for the submit button on the change set submission window for some commonly used version control system operations. I have almost not used the integrated version control stuff in Unity at all. I think on one project I ever used it because I don't think the integrated version control stuff supports Git. Gosh, where is that now? Who knows where that's buried? Is that asset management? Collab history version control. Did that window, hello? Did that not pop up a window somewhere? Okay, never mind Unity. I didn't want to look at that window anyway. What? That was weird. Anyway, I've only used the integrated version control stuff in Unity with, well, what's it called? Perforce on a bigger game, like game project. But usually in my normal life and on various projects I work on, we use Get and we just do version control outside of Unity. So I don't have a ton of experience with the integrated version control system because I don't think, well, Unity Collab is Git based, but I don't think like the built-in version control tool, I may be wrong about this, but I don't think it supports Git. I also have no idea why that window doesn't show up. Maybe it's because I don't have any source control set up. Anyway, okay, well, that doesn't do much for me, I don't think, unless it does actually support Git, and I don't know about it. That's external version control, but I want, yeah, okay, version control integration. So I think there's really only, yeah, Perforce and Plastic SCM. I don't know anything about Plastic, actually. I've heard its name before, but I've never used it. Good with huge repos. No for Git. Good with huge files. No. Can lock files to avoid merging. Binaries are, yeah. I mean, these are some of the reasons that I feel like big game studios, you wouldn't use Git. I see Subversion a fair amount, which I don't know if that's what those people learned 100 years ago. I don't know why people still use Subversion, but people do. Yeah, look at this. Painful. Painful. I don't know. Maybe that's what people learned and they still use it. I like Git, but that's just from a slightly different development background. Perforce I've definitely seen in like real life game world. It comes with great GUIs. I don't know. Source tree is okay. It's okay. I would be interesting. You don't need a PhD in branching. Yeah, good grief. Yeah, nope. Okay, if it made that smoother, it might be fully worth it, whatever the cost. So what I would be really interested though is in like, I don't even know what to call it, but having sort of first-class citizen branches. I feel like I've seen this in Perforce, where Git kind of always wants you to funnel back into, you can branch out, but it sort of always wants you to come back to something canonical. But the idea of saying like, oh, I have a game and I have the Switch version and the Xbox version, and this part's identical, but these parts aren't, and they will always be separate. I feel like that's a thing that Perforce can do. I don't quite know what to call that though. Am I using Unity Hub? I am using Unity Hub. I'm into it. I like Unity Hub. That has the new Android SDK installer too, which is quite good, or seems good. I'm curious about that, like maintaining separate, not just feature branches, but sort of like permanent forks almost. Anyway, okay, well, so there's new stuff in that version control system that will probably not affect me because I don't usually use those other version control solutions. Man, Perforce though, complicated. Seemed complicated to me. It was cool to have the version control built into Unity though. If you've never tried that, that's pretty handy. Columns in the shortcut manager, great. Model inspector on large meshes, performance. Okay, new key store creation. Well, maybe that's good because, oh, there's a key store creation. It says reworked, but I didn't think there was one before. I thought you had to go out and do that manually. So that's like for deploying an Android application. That could make life a little better. Lots of new global illumination stuff. Will be available in high definition render pipeline. User defined range for area lights. What? What did you say to me? Area lights? Is that only, area lights are only high definition render pipeline, right? Like you can't have a, can you have an area light? Oh, baked only. Yeah. You can have baked area lights. Got it. I think you can maybe have real-time area lights in the high definition render pipeline. Okay. Yes. Right. I forgot. You can have area lights. They're baked only. GPU light mapper. Light Pro gizmos are now affected by post-processing. What? Why would the gizmo be affected? Okay, light and baking stuff, graphics. Look at all this graphic stuff. Okay, maybe these are all the things where I was saying like, where's the rendering? But maybe it's in this world. Dynamic resolution scaling in the lightweight render pipeline. That sounds good. Although, you know, I would hope that if you're being lightweight, you would be lightweight enough. Oh yeah, you're going to bring in your chair? Be sure put some cameras in there. Filtering for sorting layers to the scriptable render context. So you could filter based on the normal Unity layers. That's interesting. More bones. That's 32 bones on a single vertex. That seems overkill. Motion vectors behavior. I have not done anything in Unity with motion vectors really. Creation of textures, ring async load, frame debugger. You can now blit to and from texture arrays. That's handy. Graphics fences. I don't know what that means, but they're now available. Dynamic resolution. Metal stuff, metal stuff, metal stuff. Not super excited about metal stuff because I'm not doing a lot on iOS at the moment. Light rectangles for oblique projection matrices. I don't know what that means. I'm glad. Mesh creation for terrain details on parallel threads. Ooh, that sounds good. That sounds actually very good. Because I wonder if that's mesh creation and instantiation. Like if that's truly, like if that's just when you create it while authoring the mesh, or if that is also true while like loading a scene with a terrain in it. Because I feel like that performance has kind of sucked. I wonder if this helps that. Like switching scenes, the loading of terrain, I have found at least with minimal usage of that was pretty heavy. So maybe parallelization will help that. Removed a stall on the render thread while loading large textures. That's great. I love it when you remove stalls. Revamp the draw procedural API. Draw procedural now replaces the existing API. I don't even know what the draw procedural API is. I've never used it, but now it's gone. And now we use draw procedural now. Shader selection dropdown in material asset editor got replaced with a searchable dropdown. So that sounds like that thing that they were talking about, this thing where you can do an add component and you've got this searchable hierarchical dropdown. So it sounds like they have now added that to the shader selection, and they have. So that's handy. Cool. Bitmap streaming now supported in editor mode when enabled in editor settings. Oh my gosh. Updated the ASTC texture compressor with faster multi-core compression. That's huge because sometimes you would do something seemingly innocent, like go into your build settings and on when you're building for Android, switch to, I can't show you because I don't have the Android installed, Android module installed. Switch to ASTC texture compression, and then suddenly it's like, oh crap, my editor is unusable now for half an hour because it's going to recompress every single texture. So parallelizing that sounds great. Geez, why is this just crammed down in the code? Performance of code generated by IL2 CPP has been improved by up to 20%. That seems like a bigger deal. A ride at Disney World Epcot uses Unity. Oh, cool. Oh, that's funny. They were probably not supposed to see that. I think Unity's great. I mean, I'm sure I've talked about this before, but you know, not that many years ago, every project that I worked on, I felt was a different framework, and it was constantly switching. It'd be like, well, today it's going to be processing, and then tomorrow it's going to be Cinder. The next day it's going to be Open Frameworks. Then we're going to do WebGL with Three.js. Like, I was just constantly changing tools, and that was kind of fun in some ways, but it meant that I was not gaining like extreme proficiency in any of those realms. So now maybe close to 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I decided I'm just going to do everything in Unity, whether it should be done in Unity or not. I'm just going to use it for every possible thing. I just used it for a big installation. That big installation I did at the Children's Museum last fall was Unity based. I appreciate that. Thanks, Jacqueline. I like Unity a lot. One of the things, the places that I'm missing it are for weird embedded things. Because when I want to do, if I want to do some weird graphically driven thing on a Raspberry Pi just so I can stick it on the back of a TV or something, it's not great for that. There is this new thing that's pretty weird and potentially cool called Tiny Mode, I think it's called, if we look in the package manager. Whoa, XR Legacy input helpers. What was that? Just got distracted. Is the new input system now like the new input system? Interesting. This thing, Tiny Mode. Tiny Mode's pretty weird right now. It's web-based. I think you actually even write I want to say you write in JavaScript, if not something even weirder, but not C#. It's for like little web-based games, and by that they mean like little embedded ads, unfortunately, to cram into games. But I like the idea of there being a tiny Unity, so I can do Unity stuff in a tiny way. Sounds pretty exciting. I'm getting to the point that I might even consider like using Unity for headless jobs, like totally non-graphical things, just for consistency in my workflow. What else? So that's a nice little thing. That could be handy. This sounds kind of very impressive. I'm very curious about these code performances. What's new on iOS? Wi-Fi capability. Oh, that's like permissions thing. Launch screen image fields. Ugh. It was so nice when iOS had there was one iOS device with one resolution, and you didn't have to think about 45 permutations the way you do now. Device generation parsing. Okay, great. Mobile. Native HDR light maps. It's handy. RGBM. What's the M? No. That's probably not what it is. Oh, so it's an HDR format, like from EXR HDR can be encoded into RGBM format. Ah, so instead of alpha, you have a multiplier. That's pretty cool. So you could sort of select, I mean, I do stuff like that where I just multiply every pixel times 2 or whatever, but that way you could be much more selective. SketchUp import worked. Just dragging the SketchUp file into the assets folder and done. That's pretty handy. The danger of that workflow, and the reason I never do it with C4D or with Maya, is that I bet it has to use SketchUp. So if you were working with somebody and you checked that into version control and they checked it out and they didn't have SketchUp, the project wouldn't be usable. So that is cool that that works, certainly, but I'm very hesitant personally of using like native 3D formats imported directly into Unity. Not native, I mean like application specific, like an MA file or a C4D file. It can be handy, but it in my mind, it just kind of causes headaches. Like that's why I always do the thing. And I kind of think that Maya sort of agrees, like this idea, all the stuff they've added to Maya LT about sending stuff to Unity and getting stuff back. Different parts, different materials, different parts of the mesh. I don't know. That would kind of depend on what Unity is doing to parse the SketchUp file, because normally, like if it, you know, my assumption is behind the scenes, it's secretly turning it into an FBX, and in which case you'd have to have different materials assigned to different parts of a mesh. I don't know how to do that in SketchUp, actually. Does that work? Can you have different materials on different parts of a mesh? Submeshes? Okay, what else? We made it through this. VSync handling, Max standalone, more stable. Cool. Package manager stuff. So there's a new package manager UI. Minimize, maximize. Selected built-in package, last filter, UI layout. So they're working on the package manager. That's nice. Various changes to that. I mean, it's becoming a more and more important citizen in the world of Unity. So, okay, cool. Package manager stuff. Some new particle stuff. Texture sheet animation. Oh, animations to be specific to each mesh being used. Is that what that feedback meant earlier that I didn't understand? Expose particle mesh indices to script, allowing users to get set which mesh each particle is using. So that is what the notes said, and there did not seem to be a way to do that in the editor that I could tell, like to have an array of meshes or anything like that, unless that's associated with texture sheet animation in some way. I don't know. But that's pretty cool and weird to have particle-based meshes with control over. I don't even think you can do that with like non-particle based. I'm sorry, non-mesh based particles. Cool. Color everything, get a material per face. That's almost a, what would you call that? That's a pretty common strategy. Is like I feel like it has a name. Like in 3D modeling, just to put primary or secondary colors on things like bright red, bright green, bright blue, and then bake that so you can have a color atlas, just to make it easier when you take that later to apply materials. So that seems like a reasonably common workflow. Based on a unique color, you get a separate mesh. Well, that doesn't seem ideal. Well, that's fine. So like maybe that's just how it has to work with SketchUp, because normally a mesh that's imported can have submeshes and have different materials assigned to it in a material array, but still be one mesh. So cool. I'm glad you like it. Definitely make something cool. What else? So I'm curious about this mesh-based particle stuff. I just haven't done much with mesh-based particles. A little bit of new physics stuff. Move rotation that expects quaternion. Okay. Okay. Playables on behavior pause. And when the playable is paused, and okay, great. Preloading is now supported for any native plugin. I don't even know what that means, actually. When double clicking on a plugin in Unity project, an associated IDE will open up. That's pretty handy. Although now, my understanding is now when you use a Gradle build flow, you don't even need like jar-based plugins for Android. You can just throw Java files in. New fancy profiler stuff. None of this immediately jumps out to me as super useful to me, but I'm also not the most adept profiler user in the universe. I love it. I love the chair. Wait, but are you saying there's a single mesh, and then when you look at the mesh renderer, there's two different materials inside it? Because that would be sort of the normal thing that would happen. Touchpad pointer emulation on the touchpad. I'm very curious about. They were talking about this on the Giant Bombcast today, or whenever it was, Tuesday's Giant Bombcast, which I was listening to today. What's going to happen in the next generation of consoles, the new, whatever, the PS5, to the touchpad on the PS4? Like, it's not leveraged very much. I like it because it's sort of de facto become a way to bring up maps easily, but I wonder if it will continue existing. Okay, so two materials, single mesh. Okay, cool. Yeah, that seems like the normal FBXE thing that it would do. Cool. Well, the normal way, I think, would be, how would I do this? Like in Maya, for example. We'll let that open. Visual Studio 2019 code editor, but not Visual Studio Code? I didn't realize Visual Studio 2019 was out. Does that mean Visual Studio Code 2019 is out? So yeah, like if I had a mesh that looked like this, and this whole thing is gonna already have a material called Fong1, but if I grabbed a couple of faces and then assigned a material to just these faces, that would be Fong2, and then sent this to Unity. Let's not bother with that. Let's just do export selection and do it as an FBX and send it to where in the world might this project be? Who can say? Probably on this drive. Yes, I found it. Inside here, inside assets. Let's make a model. And then when I go in here, I'll have a model. And when I get this model in here and look at it, I believe I will see on the mesh renderer. Yeah, I have both of those materials are here. Yeah, if I look right here, there's an array of materials in the mesh renderer on the model. And when I look in here, I will see something similar to what you had. And I don't know that you have much control over how those correspond. They seem to correspond, in my experience, just to the order that they're applied in Unity. I mean, in whatever the 3D package is. But you can also swap these out. I don't do this often. I do it sometimes. I just find it a little hard to manage sometimes as far as knowing, like, well, which element in the array is what? Like, what's the right answer here? So I don't super often do a single mesh. John, there are some exciting things in Unity 2019, for sure. We're definitely down in the minutia world, but in this, if you go look at the Unity blog at the high level stuff, just to quickly reiterate my things that I think are awesome. Garbage collection seems handy. Shortcut manager seems handy. There's a new GPU light mapper, which seems cool. This scene visibility thing is interesting. So you can toggle visibility in the hierarchy now, independent of turning the mesh renderer off or disabling the game object, which is cool. There's also all these other little handy gizmo related things, like turning gizmos on, turning the hiding on and off, that kind of thing. Particle improvements, I don't think I understand. Some pretty amazing Android development improvements if you're building for an Oculus Go, for example, or I guess any Android device. The editor console change, this is the one. This is the one for me, is the filtering of the... Actually, they also have ADB Logcat, which is really cool. But the ability to filter in the console is like a life changer to me, given the project I just came off of. Ben was on that project too, where we had way too much logging going on and it was way too hard to filter, and now we can filter, and that's amazing. And then maybe the other thing I'm most excited about is this timeline signals thing, where you can have something sort of like the animation events on the old animation timelines, which sucked, but a much more seemingly robust and extensible version. So that seems very cool. And lots of other handy, weird things. Again, we're like deep down in the release notes in the preview final 2019.1 release notes in the improved section. So some of these things are like so specific that I don't even know how to speak to. Handy new terrain stuff. Volume pan spatial. Okay, that's cool. So more control over audio tracks in the timeline, which is welcome. Performance improvements in the timeline editor window display. Sounds great. Some universal Windows stuff. Executable only without building a Visual Studio project. Cool. Web stuff. I've done oh, that's web, not WebGL stuff. So you can append files that you download, which is potentially interesting. More stuff to web requests, which is cool. WebGL stuff. So you can quit. Multi-threading compatibility check. I was really excited about the Unity WebGL stuff and then like totally fell off the train because they, as far as I know, still have not really added XR support to WebGL, which is kind of a bummer because web browsers can do that stuff now, largely. Mozilla had a thing they were doing that was like Mozilla Unity XR, like that was specifically for mobile. What, Unity Web VR? This may be totally, yeah, Web VR export. It's still not totally ancient. It was worked on in September, but just the ability to have Web VR, WebGL stuff, like Unity just doesn't really officially support that stuff yet, I don't think. XR stuff in general. Linear color space on the Go and the Quest. I gotta get a hold of Quest. Wireframe shader now works with the single pass instancing in stereo mode. What? There's a wireframe shader? Is that true? Is that just a stock shader now that I don't know about? Who made a... What? Oh, you can't just mouse over this because it has its new search thing. Wireframe, VR spatial mapping. Whoa. Whoa. Weird. VR spatial mapping wireframe shader. Is that the only VR shader? Occlusion? That's cool. Unity for tiny things. The Unity Tiny. But it also doesn't support TypeScript. That's what it was. I was trying to remember. Yeah, the little tiny Unity. We were looking at that package. But you can't, it's so minimal at this point, right? You can't do any, I mean, maybe you can do web VR-ish stuff in there. Yeah, there's no even 3D in there, right? It's such a little baby. When I first heard the rumors of that before it was announced, they were calling it Utiny, like Utiny, which I thought was way better, but tiny mode, that's okay. I'm very interested to see what that evolves into, for sure. Okay, there is a wireframe shader. Great. Minimum version for Oculus to 1.28. Okay, that sort of begs a certain question. That's not how you use that expression. That leads to a certain question. I do not know where they put all this stuff. It's here in front of my face. If the Oculus integration is still busted, I'm gonna guess it is. Maybe not. Did they get rid of the... I don't see the do not use this message. Does that mean we're good, right? Did they get rid of the message that said don't use this with 2018.3? I feel like that message was just there yesterday. This release, January 31st. Amazing. Oculus Integration 1.3.4 provides several Oculus Unity SDK integrations in a single download. Great. Lip sync, voice mod. I don't even know what any of those things are. I did get what I wanted. I'm excited about this because for some time now, which is a real bummer, Oculus integration has been broken in Unity 2018.3. And they just, when you would come to this page, it'd be like, yeah, just don't use it. Just don't use Unity 2018.3. Sorry. Oops. I got a period there. Well, what are these other things? Voice mod. I don't know what voice mod is. Is that all in the Unity integration package? Oculus voice mod. Nobody knows what it is. Okay, great. Well, it's in there. The spatializer, voice mod and lip sync. Does that mean I can talk and make my son have a mouth? It's voice mod 1.0. Is that like the freshest and newest? Unity integration release page. 143, brand spanking new. Updates to OVO. Man, we're getting all kinds of patch notes now. Maybe I should finish the Unity patch notes before getting into the Oculus patch notes. We're almost done. So there's a new minimum Oculus version. XR lightweight render pipeline. Single pass double wide rendering has been implemented as a stereo rendering method fallback for Android devices that do not support single pass instancing. Yeah, so single pass instancing is the new thing where... So first there was the multipass, right? Where it's like draw the left eye, then draw the right eye. And then they got into single pass that was like, well, let's draw the left eye and while we're at it, let's also draw the right eye, which was much more efficient. And now they do it with instancing so that if your shader supports GPU instancing, you can essentially have almost like a zero cost second eyeball draw, which is pretty amazing. I have not played with that much, so I do not fully understand it. However, the fallback currently in 2018.3 is if you can't do the single pass instancing where it's like draw this simultaneously with this, it would fall back to multipass, which sucked. But now it will fly back to single, which seems better. It's complicated. What's complicated? All of this? Everything's complicated. Multipass rendering is no longer selectable. So you can't do multipass rendering from scriptable render pipeline? Stereo, single pass stereo, automatically be selected. Okay. Android Y flip issue. I don't know what that is. Shadows render correctly on all Android platforms. Cool. VR watermark will no longer be rendered on the HMD. Why would that have happened? Okay, great. Well, none of those seem dramatically exciting. Lots of API changes. We are not going to dive into all the API changes. Lots of fixes. That's good. I don't have any, like... The biggest bugs in my mind that I was tracking recently were the Oculus integration and the incompatibility with Visual Studio Code. And both of those things seem to be mostly okay. The rendering method for some VR games now leverages some crazy AI stuff to make it look better. Yeah, I've seen some of that stuff. Oculus has, one of them is like where you render it all and then you just figure out the delta between what goes on in this eye and sort of squish it around and only re-render the pixels you need. There's some weird stuff. I don't need anything that complicated, but I do like the single pass instancing because that, you know, when we first started getting into like VR world, it was like, okay, it's time to render this and we need to render it 60 times a second twice. And that was a huge performance constraint. And then with the single pass, it was like, okay, we need to render it twice, but we can be a little more efficient about those two renders. But with the instancing, I'm pretty excited about that. I don't know how to add support for that to shaders though. I need to learn how to make sure all that works. Okay, cool. Lots of bug fixes. Lovely to see, but I don't think I have any that I'm super fixated on, except for the two I just mentioned. It's a lot of fixes. Cool. So that's all of those. So we made it through all of them. Let's also look at the roadmap because maybe that will let us know some other stuff. Shaders in high-end scriptable pipeline are supposed to support it. I don't know. Is that true? The only AI thing that I was seeing that was like, maybe this is what you're referring to. I'm not sure. Well, that sounds different. The only AI stuff I saw going through these notes was that NVIDIA denoiser thing, which looks really cool for like light mapping that ends up with a lot of noise in it. That it uses AI. What I didn't get clear on, and I just didn't dive in, was whether that was a light map calculation thing, like as it calculated the light map, it denoised then, or if it was at render time. I don't know the answer. It kind of looked like it was at the calculation phase. Okay, so what else is happening here? WebAssembly multi-threading support. Sounds cool. That should make WebGL stuff run better. ARM support for Windows World kind of stuff. Async shader compilation. Faster iteration on Android. This whole thing sounds pretty awesome. I would like faster iteration everywhere. Modular rigging, garbage collector update, light mapper improvements, graphics format API. John, thanks for stopping by. I super appreciate it. I'm going to continue going through these release notes until I find something magical, but I don't know how I'm going to beat that. The searching the console, that may be as good as it gets. H.265 support, particle system C# job support. I got to get into the job system. It's time. Progressive light mapper, shortcut manager, texture bitmap streaming and edit mode, timeline signals. It's funny that these aren't marked as on track. World building scene visibility. That's the hiding in the scenes. Okay, so looking at the 2019.1 roadmap, looks like they haven't updated this page yet because this still says alpha. Looks like most of the stuff that seems big we already talked about in the patch notes. So no giant surprises in there, I guess. I'm so curious about this new input system because the legacy input system is not my jam. I'm also, of course, very curious about the editor VR stuff. Man, the idea that we came up with where we could like come up with some kind of asset that lets you, is that possible? Would it even be possible? What a weird idea to like have to maintain editor usage, like using the inspector remotely connected to something that was running on a device like a Oculus Go or something. Is that a good idea or a terrible idea? Not sure. There's all these things in development. Generic IK sounds pretty interesting. I wonder what that will do with final IK, but that sounds pretty good. Audio recording could be cool. I do tons of weird audio stuff. Audio recording would be handy. Editor DPI emulation. DPI emulation. That could be pretty handy when you are working on, for example, a HD, 1920 1080 monitor, and you want to push. You're going to focus, like push to an iOS device or something that could be 2x or 3x. More formats. GUI debugger. Mobile optimizations for physically based rendering. Profiling API. I know very little about the profiling API, except that thing where you can like start block and end block, like the sample, whatever, begin sample, end sample. That may not even count as the API. Save. Oh my gosh. Save play mode changes. Make it possible to selectively persist changes made during play mode so they are not lost. Is that like maybe everybody's most hated thing about Unity? Accidentally doing that and having no way to save? That could actually be, man, that could be pretty huge. Snapshot tracks for timeline. I don't know what that means, and there's no description. Multi-layer stereo. Oh, rendering them as the, yeah. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So you can kind of semi do that with Oculus compositing layers, which it sounds like those got an update. But this seems like you can render directly to the compositor, which seems like that could be a big deal for performance. Okay, but these are pie in the sky things. Who knows when these are coming? Research world, development with no timeline. I hope they update this soon because I want to know. Okay, cool. Well, we made it through those release notes, but then we got distracted by these release notes. So new updates to OVR overlay that includes a GUI redesign and new features. That sounds good because OVR overlays were not great and they were like wildly inconsistent from platform to platform. Like there were some overlays that only worked on the Android devices but not on the desktop devices. So does it say what's new here? What do we see? Updates and new features are detailed. Are they really? I don't want to read all of them, though. I just want to know. Like, cylindrical, for example, used to only be on mobile. Did that change? Nope, still seems to be true. Well, that's lame. That's the only thing I really cared about. Override. So more flexibility in the OVR overlays. That's handy. I mean, the OVR overlays are cool. They're so platform specific, but there's cool stuff you can do. Basically, instead of saying like, here's my Unity eyeball buffer, this is what I rendered, now stick it on the headset, you have the ability to say like, well, here's my eye buffer, but hey, could you render this in front of it or render this behind it? And so there's room for pretty dramatic quality changes for stuff that's rendered. Like a lot of times, I think menus on Oculus devices are rendered with overlays for that reason, for just to be crisper, especially more legible text, things like that. Uploading language packs, asset files, OBBs, those are those big old bundle, those supplementary bundles, I think, for Android from the command line. Added UI and OVR Manager to set up target Oculus device. Oh, interesting. So the Oculus Manager can now give you control over Android targets, or what happens on the Android target, it would seem. New audio spatializer. Okay, cool. So hopefully this solves the stupid problem of not being like that Oculus 2018.3 incompatibility. However, one thing I'm curious about is in the package manager, Oculus is in here now. So like Oculus Android and Oculus standalone, but these are version 1.2.9, and that is a smaller number than 1.3.4. And so can you choose to not use these packages and instead use the what if they've changed their Unity Getting Started guide to reflect these changes? Because It's kind of cool that Unity ships with some amount of that stuff, but it's also potentially annoying. Okay, what else was new? Release notes, documentation, samples, a restricted asset. Okay, but what's weird is we got this thing here, but no mention of whatever the heck when we looked over here, what voice mod is. What is that? I want it. Like when I go here, that's the wrong place. That's not where I want to be at all. So if we go to Unity downloads, there's a lip sync utility. Unity spatializer, native spatializer, wise spatializer. OVR voice mod, is that the thing? Okay, so Oculus Lip Sync is an add-on plugin and a set of scripts that can be used to sync mouth movements of a game or other digital asset to speech sounds from pre-recorded audio or live microphone input in real time. What? When did that happen? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? That sounds cool. That seems pretty cool. Oh no! I've been streaming for more than 2 hours and I have not. Maybe it's okay because I haven't saved any files. We don't want Backblaze to... I guess we've saved like one file. Okay, we're paused again. Okay, so that sounds pretty cool, actually. I've got some ideas for that. So what is this thing, though? First public release of the Oculus Voice Mod integration. OVR Voice Mod is an add-on plugin and a set of scripts used to modify incoming audio signals. It analyzes audio input streams for canned sources, dialogue, or a microphone input, and regenerates the audio with modified characteristics, making a person's voice. Oh, that's okay. That's just fun joke. That's just fun toy. So like, I guess if you were streaming audio, like a shared social experience or something like that, somebody could be a robot or something like that. Okay. Well, cool. We went through a lot of release notes. We messed with some stuff in the editor. We actually did a little bit less editor experimentation than I was expecting. Maybe just because the features that came out were not all of them were very like editor obvious, or maybe because the stuff that we would want to play with in the editor is more is relegated to packages now. Man, I got to get into this thing. We got to learn the visual effects graph. We just need a script for that, or a stream for that. Okay. I think that's all we wanted to do today. I think we just wanted to go through that. I'm pretty excited about this release. I'm excited about Unity's strategy now. Like, these tech releases are cool. They're like their apparent willingness for fast iteration on a lot of features that I think they've set themselves up for well. Yeah, good work, everybody. I think it's pretty cool. Draklyn's going to do some amazing networked shader or networked SketchUp based thing. I'm going to maybe make the sun talk. Maybe. I don't know if I really want to do that. I kind of like it without it. Can't get the texture to line up. Not sure what size the face is. Oh, no. I don't know. I mean, normally that would be kind of a UV sort of thing, but I don't know if does SketchUp have any UV tools? I don't actually know. Anyway, that's 2.5 hours of streaming. That's longer than I meant to stream on this, but hey, we made it. We made it through this thing. So in the coming days, I would like to do some more streams on the Sunshine, although I really want to finish that thing. I also want to I've got a workshop that I'm doing next week that I am like, let's say not as prepared for as I should be. It's all in here. It's all in here. So maybe we'll do some work streams where I get some of this out of here onto paper and just come up with sort of what I want to talk about for this workshop. In the meantime, thank you for joining me. Thanks for everybody who dropped by. Jacqueline, of course. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, John. Very much appreciated. Anybody else who caught the stream? This thing I will upload to YouTube because that's a thing I do now. And that's that. Unseen. Thanks for taking a look. I would like to do more of these. I would like to do more of these where we look at the patch notes and maybe some where we dive in on some features, like the visual effects graph is definitely something I want to learn about. So until that time, have a lovely evening and we will talk soon.